Hello and welcome to video number 5 in my series about playing and preparing for a pen and paper role-playing game. And right now we have a setting fleshed out as far as you feel it's necessary. You have a group of players who are on board with what you're wanting to do and have characters who are willing to work together. So it sounds like we're ready to write our first adventure. And the first adventure is one of the most important because it's the introduction to this setting and to this game. It's the first time that the players are really going to get a working look into what you've had on your mind. So there's a lot of pressure on this first adventure, but at the same time it's really difficult because you don't have anything to build on. Like, the players don't have any history in this setting yet, so you have to introduce all of this to them at once. So the first hurdle to get over with your first adventure is why on earth the players are going to go on it. And this one really pulls from the work we've done earlier, because if you have players who all have a reason to work together and whom hopefully have some stake in at least each other, if not necessarily the setting itself, then it's going to be easier for them to understand why their characters would do this. A lot of games in the past, it's become almost a cliche, start off with the players taking a job from a stranger they meet in a bar. This is really bad for a couple of different reasons. On the first part, it's absolutely stupid because you wind up with this asinine economy where strangers just walk up to heavily armed people in taverns and like tell them to go kill stuff for them, and that's acceptable. And the second part for why that's a bad idea is, what if the players say no? You don't want to hinge your entire first adventure on assuming that the players are going to do something, because if there's one thing players are really good at, it's not doing what you expect them to do. So, and it doesn't really matter how much incentive you like wave in front of them, then chances are good that there's still going to be at least a couple of people in the group going, no, I don't want to do that. And so you have to get ready for that. Now, I'm sure there are groups of players out there who are like really into it and like understand what you're doing and stuff, and they're like, cool, we want to go to the bar and see if we can find jobs. It's like, that's fine. If that's what you have to work with, fantastic. But don't expect that. So what you need with your first adventure is you need a way to get the players into it pretty much without their consent, necessarily. Like, and this is where I talked about earlier, where it's like, start them out in prison, start them out on an island, start them out, have something happen to them, but you have to take control of the first adventure and get the ball rolling. Don't depend on the players to motivate themselves to just be like, hey, we're going to go wander around town now looking for the adventure hook, because that's not going to happen. So take control of the first adventure right off the bat, and, I mean, I'm not saying like shoehorn them into it necessarily, but like, yeah, give them a chance to walk around town or something and like talk to some NPCs or whatever, but then pretty quickly have something happens that necessitates their activity into something that leads them into the adventure. Now, how you go about doing the adventure is really dependent on what type of game you're running. And there are a couple of different broad types of adventure, but they typically fall into two big categories. There are scenario-based adventures, and there are dungeon crawl adventures. And for this video I'm going to start out with a dungeon crawl adventure just because I think those are the simplest to do. But this will really work with either of them. So you have your players who are, for whatever reason, now strongly motivated to do something. And what you want to do now is, since you've already got them doing this thing for you, okay, it's like, you've taken that much control of them at least, not necessarily like overtly, but at least covertly. So you've got them on the adventure now. You want to give them a few options within the adventure. And a good way to do this is, like, say if you're making a dungeon crawl, don't make a dungeon that initially goes like straight from point A to point B to point C. give them branches, like give the players an opportunity to explore different avenues and stuff. And even if your adventure is nothing more than a simple series of tunnels within a dungeon, then have the different tunnels require different things. Like, don't make it just a series of fights from one room to the next with corridors between. That's dull. Instead, like, have one corridor that they go down, and all of a sudden they have to swim across, like, some kind of river, or climb up a wall, or maybe they have to sneak past a trap. But if they go down another corridor, then maybe they have to decipher some language, or something like that. Give them a wide variety as soon as you can, because that'll get the players thinking about, like, different ways to approach problems, and it'll also give players an opportunity to use the skills that they took during character creation. So, you've got all that going on. Now, throw some tidbits from your setting in. I mean, you spent some time working on it, why not show them a little bit of it? Don't, like, start out with, like, a 15-minute introduction where you're standing there reading them, like, the intricate backstory that you've come up with. If you've come up with one, great, more power to you, but don't bore the players with it. Instead, like, have them meet another NPC. Like, we're already in a dungeon, like, why not have them come across, like, a NPC from a distant town who's fleeing from some disaster that took place there, and he got stuck in this dungeon. Okay, cool. So now you have another character in the dungeon with them, and he's there because of something that's happened somewhere else in the setting. Okay, that's fine. Well, if they go down another tunnel, have them discover some treasure map that leads them, or will supposedly eventually lead them to some, like, lost city or fabled artifact or something like that. That's cool. And have them go through another place and maybe have them, like, uncover some weird experiment that whoever put them in the dungeon in the first place was doing. Like, try to tie all the stuff that they're seeing and finding in this first adventure into the larger things that are going on in your setting. And this will make the setting seem a lot more real to the players without you having to sit there and narrate to them, because for the most part they're not gonna care. So, showing it to them like this, it doesn't bore them, it makes them interested, or at least from my experience, that's what happens. And if they're not interested in a particular aspect, that's fine, because they're gonna find another one in a few minutes, maybe that'll get their attention. This video ran unusually long, so I had to cut it into 2 halves, so this will be all for the first video, and then I will put the rest of it up as a second video. So, sorry about that, and I will see you next time.
Oh god, what would be a good